Hello, this is second in a series of videos I'm doing on issues kind of related to predestination, election, Calvinism, free will. Did one earlier on the way we hold together both God's sovereignty and our responsibility, our making choices and being held accountable for those choices. And in this video, I want to talk about what do we mean by free will. It's one of those things, you can get into a discussion with people and just use the term as though everybody knows what you talk about. But we realize there can be different things we mean when we say free will. And I'm going to explain. I'm not really comfortable with the term free will because I think what a lot of people mean is not exactly what I mean. And I do believe you have free choice. So I'm more comfortable with that. But so here's the thing. I think a lot of people, when you know bring up free will, their idea is they make choices and make decisions um, from a position of complete neutrality. That nothing is really swaying me to one way or the other. I'm making a choice, and that choice is really completely and totally mine. And of course, recognize some things influencing us. And that's really kind of the issue with me is to what extent do things influence us? Because we're not really um, completely free. We are shaped, we are molded by a variety of factors. And I think anybody would usually agree with this that, if you start to think about it and how we make choices, things do influence us, they do shape us. I mean, just kind of our choices are limited by physically where we are. Our choices are limited by the knowledge we have. And maybe you've had those kind of late night discussions about nature versus nurture. But it really is true that we have certain inclinations based on genetic predisposition towards things, or maybe our hormones lead us towards different sorts of behaviors at different times. Psychologically, we have um, past experiences helping us interpret and shape and make decisions, and we're not making them in a complete vacuum. I think it's interesting if you start looking at willpower, how many things talk about how to increase willpower, because we're learning it more and more that willpower is something that as you get tired, you have less willpower. When you're fresh, you have more willpower. If you've made decisions all day, you've lost willpower because making decisions kind of fatigues that ability. So even our willpower is something that can be limited, and our choices, based on how tired we are or what kind of mood we're in. Socially, we can be pressured. We can um, you know accept things easier if a group accepts us. We do a lot of things on the basis of habit. You probably had the experience of driving somewhere and kind of waking up in the middle of the drive and realizing those last three turns I didn't pay much attention. And if you think about when you first learned to drive, you had to really focus to do everything. When we have habits, we kind of make choices automatically, and perhaps you found yourself doing things. Um, in a sense, you made a choice, but otherwise, you really weren't conscious of that decision. We kind of do a lot of things through habit that we do daily. We just have the cue and we respond. Um, Previous decisions lead us towards things. I think most people agree that, in a sense, our will isn't completely free because we are influenced, we're shaped. I mean, if you're in marketing or sales, you've probably learned techniques to help influence people's decisions and move people to make choices that they might not make if they weren't, if those other factors weren't shaping them. Just things as simple as product placement on a shelf. These do shape us, they do force us. So we recognize things move us to make decisions. But at the same time, I would be comfortable with the idea of saying free will in the sense that we're not coerced, we're not forced. To say that I'm influenced by different things, that different things that shape me, that I'm making choices from these things, doesn't mean something outside of me is making me do something I don't want to do. It's just recognizing what exactly we mean by will, because it's not coercing, but there is things influenced. And if you believe in a God who is all powerful, surely you would have to recognize that that God has something to do with those things going on in your life that influence you to make decisions, that bring things to your mind at a certain time, that make you more receptive at certain times to make decisions. That if you recognize there's different things that influence you, that certainly God is the ultimate power behind those influence and those decisions. Still not coercing you, but um, playing a role in what we do. Um, and one of the things is, we're not coerced, but we are making decisions. Those decisions are influenced, and all of those decisions are on the basis of our nature and our desires. You're freely choosing what you desire. You're always choosing what you think is best and what you desire and what you want most. But here's the thing for me that helped me see this most clearly is uh, you don't decide what those desires are. You choose according to your desires, but you don't just sit down and decide what to desire. Blaise Pascal said the heart has its reasons that reason does not know. Um, and Emily Dickinson said the heart wants what it wants. Um, it's not as though you make a decision of what to desire. You freely choose what you desire. So the example I like to use is, and we have potlucks at church, and let's say somebody brings broccoli to that potluck. You are free to take that broccoli. But if you don't like broccoli, you're not going to get it. If you do like broccoli, you're going to get it. But you really can't make yourself say, I like broccoli. You don't choose what foods you like. Now, obviously, if the doctor has told you you need to eat something or stop eating something, you make decisions, but that's not the same as liking the thing in itself. You might do things you don't like because you see a greater good in your health, but people we're attracted to, that we fall in love with, um, things that we desire, are not things that we really choose on our own. Again, we might kind of come to a point where we try to shape our taste. But as far as just an act of the will deciding that I'm going to like a food that I don't like, or I'm going to enjoy a type of music I don't enjoy, isn't something we can do. Those desires are there, and we freely act on those desires, but we can't choose what those desires are. And one of the things I'm reminded of is um, times when I used to smoke cigarettes, and so I can vividly remember times that I was saying to myself, I don't want to smoke anymore. I want to stop smoking. It's effort and money to smoke. And at the same time, I would go and get cigarettes and I would light up. And the whole time thinking, I really don't want to smoke this cigarette. But there was something else that was so much stronger that it took a lot of effort to overcome. Um, and that was only seeing a better good that helped me overcome that. So I think there's been times where you might have experienced where you've done something that part of you really didn't want to do, but there was a greater draw to do it. So I bring these up to think, what do we mean by free will? We can freely choose what we desire. We don't decide what that desire is. And even then, we're not coerced and forced. And another thing kind of related to this is we can be very simplistic in our ideas of how we make choices, causes behind things. Sometimes you'll watch a documentary and they'll explain this huge thing in history as though there's one cause to it or one event that led to it. Of course, we know that if you get into anything, you realize there's multiple causes. Our relationships are not just something we decide, but we decide and somebody else decides. And we're several people and several factors are determining those things that happen. It's not just one cause. And we believe there's different causes, and that God is the ultimate cause. He's part of that cause that takes place. Um, so, in thinking about free will and thinking about free choice and how that all works, one of the big criticisms Calvinists face, and usually kind of the argument for why people don't believe it is the idea that if people do, can be held guilty for something they can't do, or you couldn't be rewarded for doing good that you couldn't help but do. And that's something I would disagree with, because things can still be good and bad even though we're acting out of our nature. We do things on the basis of who we are. That's what Jesus said when he said, a good tree bears good fruit, a bad tree bears bad fruit. You don't make yourself into a good tree by bearing good fruit. What he's saying is our acts come out of the nature, and those acts are still moral. They're on the basis of our nature. So, for example, if somebody was to grow up in a bad home situation, let's say maybe physically they might have a greater disposition to violence, aggression or something like that. They grow up in a bad home situation through no fault of their own. They're still not really taught or shown how to make good decisions. And this person later in life commits a crime. Um, that crime is still wrong. He's still guilty, even though his nature might have been more towards committing that crime than someone who had all the benefits of, growing up in a good home and being taught morality and having resources and a lot of support. Um, it's still wrong to have committed the crime. What I mean is, even though our nature might be shaped towards bad, you're still guilty for doing something and choosing to do something on the basis of that nature. On the other hand, think of Jesus. He was perfect. He, you know, you could hypothetically say, well, Jesus could have done something wrong, but in another sense, no. His nature meant that he was never going to do anything that was sinful. Everything that Jesus was going to do is good because his nature is perfect. So when he does good, do you look at that and say, well, that's not really a good thing? There's no real reward there, because Jesus really wasn't capable of doing bad because his nature was good. Of course not. You recognize it's still good. Good and bad comes from the nature that we have, but it's still on the basis of the nature chosen, and it's still moral right and moral wrong. Um, I recognize this is a lot of heady stuff. I think it's something we don't step back a lot of times and think through. But just kind of want to lay out these categories and these ideas as you think through these things and as you see what Scripture teaches, to help you clarify when you say free will, free choice, nature, how things shape us, that you've thought through what you believe Scripture teaches, and that you've thought through what you really mean when you use these terms. Thanks.